Good morning. On behalf of the Center for the Study of Ethics, I would like to welcome you to our 28th Annual Ethics Awareness Week. My name is Brian Birch, and I'm the Director of the Center for the Study of Ethics here at Utah Valley University. We're very excited to have you join us this week for 12 sessions that center around the theme of ethical dimensions of civic life. And on behalf of the center, I want to thank everyone who was involved in the planning and preparation and hosting of this virtual event. This is a campus-wide initiative where we involve colleges, schools, departments, centers, and other units to help our students and help our community engage ethical issues that are manifest in a variety of ways we think and live and operate in society. We have been focused of late on civics education and on issues having to deal with public life. And so this theme again this year is our contribution to that broad effort. And we hope that it's of use not only to our students, but like I said, to our community at large. And at this point, I don't want to take too much time with our introductions. I want to turn the time over to Nicole Ortega, who is a faculty fellow here in the Ethics Center, to introduce our first speaker. Nicole.
Thank you, Brian. As Brian said, I'm Nicole Ortega, and I'm a faculty fellow in the Center for the Study of Ethics. I'm also a professor in the Department of Dance. I am so excited to have Barbara here today. I'm going to read a bio for her. I was going to say a short bio, but it's a little bit longer. But the more I've read about her, the more I'm just thoroughly impressed. So I'll just read this introduction for Barbara. Barbara Schaefer-Baker co-directs Animating Democracy, a program of Americans for the Arts that inspires, informs, promotes, and connects arts and culture as potent contributors to the community, civic, and social change. Additionally, she contributes to local arts advancement work at Americans for the Arts. As a consultant in program design and evaluation, Barbara serves as an advisor for state and national art agencies and private foundations. Barbara previously served as Executive Director of the Arts Extension Services at the University of Massachusetts. She is President of the Arts Extension Institute, Incorporated, and a board member for the Women Arts. Barbara served for 14 years on the Belchertown, Massachusetts School Committee. In 2018, Barbara received the Robert E. Gard Foundation Leadership Award. She currently serves as a member of the Massachusetts Cultural Council. Barbara has contributed to many publications, and you can look those up, but there's quite a few listed here. Again, we're so excited to have Barbara here, and I'm just going to let her take it away, and she'll just kind of let you know about questions and things like that. So Barbara.
Thank you so much. I really am pleased to be here. My invitation came by way of Courtney Davis, acting chair in the art department. And I thank Brian and Nicole and Evan and everyone who's helping make this work. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm coming to you from Belchertown. It's Belchertown, Massachusetts, named for a governor who allegedly never stepped foot on our land, here 90 miles west of Boston, and it is the home of the Nipmuc and the Nonotuck peoples. There are still 3,000 tribal family and clan members living throughout southern New England in this region that I am happy to be in. So I am going to speak with you today. This focus on arts and civic engagement has been the focus of my work since the mid-90s, when the Ford Foundation invited Americans for the Arts to become engaged in helping to really make connections between the arts and the other concerns of a foundation or a society, civil society, governance, community development, environment, and really wanted to help not just highlight cultural institutions, but also to highlight the ways that the arts can connect. I am going to, as I'm making some introductory remarks, I'm actually going to start a slideshow, which will allow us to just get our feet wet. I'm having a little trouble, Brian, getting to the large screen that lets me share my screen. Let's see what happens here. I see that I'm talking. I can't seem to bring up the large place. There we are. That's what I wanted, but where is it gone? Let's see. Excuse me for just a minute. I'm so sorry. Let's see, what does that usually mean? Yeah, no, I don't want to get out of there. Okay. I'm just not able to access it for some reason. Let's see, swipe. Usually it'll say, yeah, snap right. That'll help. Okay, we're there. And you can just look at the images and hopefully it'll kind of stir your own thinking as we go forward here. So I'm going to share this and just let me know if it's on the right screen. And there we go. And I think I know I need to switch them. There we go. How's that?
I think it's coming up.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
There we go.
It's just going to run on a loop. And so I want to just start by saying that we have been watching this work as it's evolved, but the work, the connection of the arts to civic and civil and social lives has been since the beginning and not new. Across the United States, artists, cultural organizations are applying this power of the artistic imagination to inform, inspire, engage, animate, motivate civic participation. The arts contribute uniquely to the work of civic engagement by validating people's stories and perspectives, by bringing people together around shared goals. They can often broaden the citizen and resident voices and their participation because it can offer a welcoming point and entry point for those who may not have felt power in the civic realm before. The arts can enhance the quality and capacity for dialogue by promoting a deeper exploration of ideas, shifting contentious public debate, sometimes being the protagonist or those who are raising the possibility of public debate and the need for it in provocative ways, but often creating different kinds of spaces, different than that public meeting or public hearing, which creates a space for listening, for expressing, for hearing alternative points of view. And the arts can promote a greater awareness of issues, very often spoken of as a herald, something that the arts as a means of bringing issues and the content of an issue to the public fore in ways that can actually contribute to shifts in thinking and attitude. And the arts can actually promote action. And I think in the last 2 years, we have seen how the arts have played a very big role in action in throughout the recent unrest, whether be it by race or around elections or around COVID issues. So evident in all of this is this power of the arts to animate democracy, which is how we took the name of our program. And these observations are now really supported by a really growing body of research and evidence, not only in the arts sector, but increasingly in public health, the environment, education, criminal justice, municipal government, where the arts are being more consciously and continuously engaged to achieve civic goals and to make change. So I want to enforce with example the power and capacity of arts and culture, provide just a little bit of history and some current context for things that are happening now. And this is this is winding up. So we'll give it a minute and give you a minute. When we speak about civic engagement, we're talking about that very broad term that encompasses the commitment to participate and contribute to the improvement of one's neighborhood, to community decision-making and resource allocation, and to participating in national engagement and dialogue and voting, but certainly not limited to voting and political engagement. There are many ways that people participate in community, civic, and political life proactively. Civic engagement can be both a means and an end, as we see it. Art encompasses a really diverse range of human activity, creations, modes of expression. And so when we at Animating Democracy talk about art, we are talking about the broadest range of the arts in all disciplines: visual, music, dance, theater, literature, poetry, spoken word, media arts, and humanities, and interdisciplinary forms, as well as cultural practice. So we're going to say goodbye here and stop that share. Hi again. I'm going to start another slideshow in just a minute to just accompany my comments. I do want to say that I welcome your own comments and questions. You'll be putting them into a form. Nicole will see them and she will share some of them with me in conversation, and I'm happy to address ideas that you have, questions and examples. I encourage you also to share examples of work that is operating in this place of civic engagement as well. So I'm going to put that aside and call up a second one. That one. And I'm going to do another screen share, I think. See if that works. Okay. Okay, and again, I think I need to switch settings. There we go. How's that?
Looks good.
Looks good. Okay. So you can see here I've borrowed from a pretty iconic piece of work. Michael Bloomberg, who was still mayor when the gates finally were put up in Central Park, really said that for all of the efforts and all of the work that had been done post 9/11, the gates was probably one of the most important ways that the city of New York was able to come together to connect, to heal, and that everything about a work which had been in the planning for years before came together at just the right moment for the city. It was a place of engagement. It was a place and a work of art that really stood in a place that created space, literally, for people to come together and for that to become a platform for further engagement. I want to start off my talk by making sure that we don't minimize the art and the artists in this discussion. It is the artists and the work itself that are creating indelible images, connecting people across real and imagined boundaries, communicating through beauty and beyond the limits of language, expressing difficult ideas, sometimes through metaphor, movement, humor. It is the artists really who are that powerful force for illuminating civic experience. And though I will talk about a lot of work that works with intention, not just around the creation or presentation of art, but around the engagement work that surrounds that creation and presentation. I don't want to lose sight of the power of the work itself and the power of creating itself. The AIDS Memorial Quilt for me really says a lot about the many ways that the arts are active in creating a civic space and in moving civic participation, all the way from building awareness of an issue to really changing policy. If you consider in 1987, the time of the quilt, it was difficult to find a cemetery where you could bury loved ones. It was difficult to find a funeral home where you could have a funeral. It was difficult to have an opportunity to memorialize, to celebrate the lives of people being lost. And so the first thing that the concept of the quilt did was to create an actual creative means for families to come together and to share in ritual and in creativity their remembrances of people that they loved. But when the quilt came together on the National Mall, it did something else. It created a space that showed that that AIDS was not the problem of one problematic subculture in the United States, but something that affected families in every walk of life, in every religion, in every economic class. It really demonstrated the place that AIDS was taking in the challenges of our society at the time. And when families went public, came out, put their quilts out together and sent them in, it began to move a movement of both education and political action that really began to move the processes that created policy, funding, and helped the country really address the AIDS crisis. And so you can see the very different levels at which the arts were operating in this one piece, this one alternative. When we talk about the way the arts play a role in civic engagement, we can think about the spark. Sometimes they are the thing that gets the conversation started, gets people to come out. The images that you see accompanying art as a spark are Mel Chin's work in a project called Fundred. It began in New Orleans, where Mel became very interested in the concerns about lead in the soil and realized that lead in the soil predated Katrina, it predated many things, and that there were actual solutions that could be achieved if the money were spent. And so he created a safe house, notice the safe, and he made that a concept where he would store Fundred. You can see the little girl, she's holding Fundred dollars because he did a national project to encourage people to make the equivalent number of dollars as they would be asking Congress to support in funding to eradicate the problem of lead in the soil. Sorry. The safe house that you see was also a gathering place for people to come and tell their stories about how they were being affected by the problems of environmental issues in their community. And the third slide, third image that you see is an armored car, which was part of the Fundred project. It literally traveled around the country where schools, community centers, art centers, all kinds of places became involved as centers for education, where education about lead was happening and people were creating their Fundred dollars and they were being collected and eventually literally driven to Congress to deliver the message that this was a problem that could be solved. Art as an invitation is the concept that the arts are often an entry point, a way for people to come together. In this case, you see a slide across the top or an image across the top of the Sojourn Theater. They're doing a performance in Lima, Ohio. The performance was a devised piece of work based on 400 interviews in the community, looking at talking with folks that lived in the county surrounding the city of Lima, who relied on the city for their water supply, most of that surrounding area being rural farmland, and city leaders and others in Lima. Behind the issue of the control of water as a resource was an issue of race and violence. And the members of this company, some of them are local and some of them are performing artists, national artists, they really looked at the issues that were being raised from everyone's point of view and put together a play called Passing Glances that was used as the center point for a conference that attracted over 250 people. You see them at the tables. You see how the tables were used. And so this particular conference, to talk about the issues, to begin to find ways to work together, centered around the experience of seeing the play together. The play became the platform for the community dialogues and relationship building that was centered to begin to improve relations in the city and county, rebuild relationships so that good work could get done. I keep getting there and I don't really want to. There we go. I want to go next to the art as a space. You're looking at Esperanza Center for Peace and Justice in San Antonio, Texas. You're looking at a city council member who is talking about some of the issues of the way the city has been divided and how neighborhoods have been affected. She's preparing the group that is assembled there to go on a bus tour that is not your usual bus tour of San Antonio. This is all done and created in a space that is a space for the Latinx and Chicana populations of San Antonio to come together to create work, to see work, and to practice their own culture and exchange. It's been a very pivotal organization in really putting the voice of the neighborhood of Latina population into the public space in San Antonio. So we see here a space in the literal sense as a space to gather. And then the small photo inserted below is you see an immigrant talking to the Pope. It's a scene from a theater work that was done at San Diego Rep. And I included here to show the concept of metaphysical space, of the space to imagine something which has not happened or has not happened yet, where this immigrant is able to speak directly into the ear of the Pope. And the final scene, so sorry, I'm working with technology I'm not good at, shows Liz Lehrman, a choreographer who's well known, a MacArthur winner, who has worked much with dancers that are in their senior years. And she is doing a dialogue. They're doing a dialogue in movement that is really exploring the ideas of technology in our world. They've just seen an exhibition. This is happening at the Henry Art Gallery in Seattle, Washington. And the participants have seen a set of artworks and they are responding to what they've seen through a series of motions and movements that have been culled from the comments of people in the group. It's a different way of hearing. Above that are some youth that are freestyling. They're rapping about the meaning of ghetto, about whether ghetto is a good or a bad influence, about whether it's a positive, warm place that is meaningful to come from, or whether it is a place to get out of. And so you can see the various ways that the arts have played a really important role. And that brings me to the slide that I keep going away from, this one, which really looks at this continuum of ways that the arts have value and impact and make a difference in the civic sphere. Very often, if you're working with a community organizer, it's all about the policy and systems that are changing. And we are today, and many people are impatient for change to systems and policies. We want systemic change. And the arts can contribute to that, they do. But to only focus there loses the nuance and the value of how the arts really help to move change, help to move participation and engagement. And so this continuum looks at that, and we'll look at a few pieces of it. Awareness and knowledge. The arts help to build attention, awareness, knowledge, and set a platform for discourse. They can really, because of the emotional content, the stimulus, the visual stimulus, the auditory stimulus, can call attention and communicate different people's lived experience in ways that can affect attitudes and values. Capacity is a huge thing. If you think of how many youth engagement projects you might have seen, especially creative youth development work that is really teaching people leadership skills and how to use their voices, whether in spoken word poetry or visually in the posters they're designing or the paintings and artwork they're creating or the photo collages that they're doing to document challenges in their neighborhood or community. Many people, not just youth, are developing capacities to be players in the change that they want to see, and developing their voices and their messages that can help people really get involved. To a next step, participation and action, showing up, taking a step, doing things. All of this contributing to improved systems supporting change that is important and needed. And I'm going to look at a few of those specifically. In terms of awareness and knowledge building, we think about deepening understanding of complex issues, giving voice, enabling dialogue, and making information more inviting. I think with climate change and environmental issues, the arts and designers are playing an incredibly strong role in helping to move information. In Philadelphia, the mural project there was tasked to develop magazines, zines for young people about COVID and about vaccination and to communicate that kind of information. So a lot is happening in that ground. In terms of attitudes and values, promoting respect, generating hope and pride. Very often, civic engagement gets stuck when people really only can think about the now and are not called in to imagine other futures or imagine their agency in other futures. And so projects that do help to bring forward what people are proud of, what people are hoping for, things that help people to express values, these kinds of projects are important. And public art projects very often are a sort of center point in a public space for that kind of activity. Capacity, which I spoke about as we looked at the continuum as a whole, you can just think about the civil rights movement and the soundtrack to that, the songs of the civil rights movement that helped people as they were literally in place, increasing the status of disenfranchised groups, developing leadership skills, and building social capital by bringing people together in different ways. In Detroit, there was a great project that was done by the design school there. They were asked to create banners for 6 or 7 different neighborhoods in Detroit. And students were tasked to get out into the neighborhoods, bring people together, and help to develop the images and messages to go along with the communities so that they could be reflected in the banners. And when the students got out in the neighborhoods, they discovered that there was a lot of debate. It was not a unified view of what should be represented. Some people didn't even like the way the neighborhood had been named and felt that that had come from external places and not from the community itself. And they did work through to create a set of banners. And several city officials commented afterward that it was like a rehearsal for democracy, that sticking with that process of moving through the discussion of icons and images and symbol and meaning as a group in their neighborhood was in fact the way they learned that they could speak up. There is certainly lots of role in the voting and political sphere, but very often mobilizing people is one of the ways that the arts have played a very big role. In Philadelphia, at the last election, they identified the polling places that had had the least participation in previous election cycles. And they invited artists from those neighborhoods to create sandwich signs that really marked the voting places and to create performance and activity around those sites so that they would become places where people wanted to go and wanted to be. They also intentionally capitalized on the social networks of those artists to reach voters that more standard kinds of campaigning might not have reached. Getting to systems and policy, improving access and equity, diversifying leadership and advancing policy change. These are all things that happen sometimes very subtly. This poster image, this mural image by Judy Baca that really highlighted the service workers in LA during the time of their strike was an incredibly powerful piece, both for the messaging to the community, but especially to the service workers themselves, to give them the power to go forward. So I'll show you the continuum again and just let you know that today we use this image and we have a guide that is available for free to help folks think about how their work that they are creating, presenting, engaged with what's my intention in making a difference in the civic realm. And if I think about that more, what are my real aims and goals? And so I show you this and there'll be a link available later so that you can go to our website and pick up more information on this continuum and also to really think about how you might want to apply this kind of thinking to your own work if you are doing creative work, either as the civic partner or the artist partner. I wanted to just share a few additional examples of how art might be working. This sculpture is actually a functional sculpture in New Orleans. There are many of them around the city. They are evacuation point markers, so that if there is an evacuation in New Orleans, evacuees who are volunteers help drive people to these sites, because these sites are the places that people will want to go to pick up transportation. So it's a public art program with a very intentional focus. This is the Village of Arts and Humanities in Philadelphia. It is a neighborhood that was always overlooked. This village is now over 30 something years old, I think nearly 40, and continues to have a constant set of artists in residence that are working with community residents to be sure that they have place, space, and opportunity for discussion and dialogue. This was one of the earliest projects in the village. Also in Philadelphia, this is a slightly different kind of program. This was an installation that was incorporated the testimonies about murdered victims who had been murdered in the city. It was, you're looking at the final installation of the work that was a collaboration between two artists and the mothers who had lost their family members. They worked for a long time in conversation and creating these wire sculptural pieces, one for each of the number that had been murdered in 1 year in Philadelphia. Had an opportunity for discussion, invited people in. It made a stunning and very moving exhibition. And the exhibition itself, besides the public memory and really creating a visual to accompany the facts, also in its presentation created a place and a space for dialogue between neighborhood residents and public officials, police and mothers, and a space where people could come together. Nicole, how are we doing?
We're doing great. There's no questions so far.
I encourage folks, and if these examples help you think of other experiences that you've had or places where you've seen the art at work in the civic framework, please do share them. This piece is called Spiral Wetland. It's a spiral jetty that is in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And it's based on the concept that was first done by Robert Smithson, a very enduring land piece. But it reaches back and uses science combined with an artistic form to do a biomimicry. It is actually a piece that is cleaning the water, but creating a visual landmark for the idea of natural processes that can be used to clean water and to remove bad things and leave good things. And so it has function. It was designed as a 1-year installation, but has been really adopted by the community and is sustained and maintained. It is become a place that kayakers go, that bikers go, that fishermen and boaters who use the lake come along and experience. And it has really helped in terms of education, in terms of native plant growth, and issues around water cleansing and water quality in the community. So I do want to stop there for a minute and just make sure that if questions want to be raised, they can be. You know, I did include the slide with folks during the civil rights movement, but I also want to note that there have been really significant art movements that have been part of civil rights movements. The Free Southern Theater, led by John O'Neill, was a part of the civil rights movement. We know that they're working with Cesar Chavez in California during the unionization movement for Chicanos. There was a theater company, El Teatro Capizano, that helped really to move the messaging and engage the farm workers. Diego Rivera was painting his murals. These are all contributors. And that's only going back in United States history and only as far back as the civil rights movement, but I think we could all go back further. In 1970 and the 70s and 80s, there was a time not unlike where we are right now. And so if you're thinking about the American Recovery Act and the way resources are being used and funded, and what is being funded, think back to the 70s and 80s, and you will come across something called the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. It was a jobs program when our economic forecasts were not good. And it actually was a massive federal jobs program, and a few people very quietly got arts into the language so that cities could hire artists to do work in their communities. And so 35 years ago, Dallas, for instance, had 400 artists working. Springfield, Massachusetts, just south of where I live, had about a dozen artists who basically were working for the city with very little in the way of a job description. They were fanning out into communities and neighborhoods and finding meaningful ways to apply their creative skills and to build opportunity for participation in the community through the arts. Many institutions that you might think of now, Pergonis Theater in New York City, San Francisco Mime Troupe, these all got their start in the CETA era, when artists were paid to be artists. Within the Recovery Act now, there is actually a number of pilot programs in San Francisco, in Minneapolis, I think, that are beginning again to pay artists as part of municipal payroll to be out and engaged with community members to move community development forward, to move civic engagement forward. And if you go back previous to that, to the WPA, which is often spoken about, the WPA didn't work in the same way that CETA did. It's an important program. It did allow many artists to get out and document our communities in whatever condition they were in, to document people, history, even contested history. And the record of the WPA in terms of imagery, words, histories, murals, is really important and provides images and ideas that people continue to go back to. So there's a good deal of historic precedence for the work that we're talking about today.
Oh, we have a question.
Okay.
What makes art so effective in causes? Are there specific qualities of the art?
I'm glad you asked, and I'll start sort of at the end of it and come backward. Sometimes we hear from a cause. I'm working on the issue of gentrification, and I really want to know some artists that can help really show what gentrification is doing to my community, and that they want artists to make the messages, to make the images, and artists are doing that kind of work, and it's good work. So sometimes it really is. It's the capturing the essence of all the buzz that's out there, of the sentiment behind things. It is, I'm trying to think about an image that we've looked at today already that really goes there in a good way. It's the strength of idea, image, words put together, or any of the above independently, but really framed well in a way that allows people to take it in, to communicate, and doesn't always require a didactic kind of a situation. So I would say that that's a part of it. Very often, though, I think we see some of the best work coming when artists are a little bit more free. They're not like producing a particular message or image, but they are free to really look at the circumstances and the dynamics that are going on, and to create work which might speak more softly or in a different way than organizers might imagine, but can make a difference. One example of that is, let's see, what am I going to point to here? I think it's in very recent times, the Civil Rights Museum that is looking at lynching now is actually a creative installation. And it's an installation of these long monoliths. Each one hangs as a representation of a lynching, of lynchings in a county. And when they created the work, where there are two of every one of these monoliths. And the partner, lays waiting for a county to be willing to claim that monolith and bring it home to represent in the county this history. So if you think about it, the artist is not just putting out a message, is not just sending a singular image, but the artist there has created something which by the act of seeing, by the act of really engaging around the work, and possibly by the act of really adopting the work, it has meaning that creates movement, creates change. So that's one way that I would answer that. I think it's always surprising what has power. There's a choreographer, Donald Byrd, who very early in our own inquiries and learning about the work, he was creating beautiful, exquisite dance works dealing with domestic violence. And he said early on, if you're going to deal with something ugly, you have to do it exquisitely. And that really made an impression on me. It really is something that has stayed with me. We look for excellence in this work, and I think that that's important.
Okay, great. There's a few more questions.
Okay.
And I do have to step out probably about 11. So I'm going to see if Brian will ask you the second question. But the
Okay.
first one is, in your opinion, where do we currently stand on the continuum of impact when it comes to climate change issues?
Well, let me go to that. So that's a really interesting place because there are a lot of artists that are really involved. There are a lot of organizations. The artists have had a prominent role in the Paris climate change. And I would say that you have artists and creative activity happening at almost every level of government and community. So the arts are very involved, and there's a lot of collaboration between science and artists. And of course, there's huge parallels in practice of science and art. And so we are seeing creative solutions to climate issues, whether that is in stormwater runoff or, and there's a ton of fabulous projects in there, light mitigation, all kinds of things like that. But a lot of work is also in the area of education. So I think there is work literally across that spectrum or continuum that is happening. What gets, big national attention and what is making a difference in local communities, it varies. There are some artists that are doing some phenomenal things interpreting data through creative means to really try to be able to let people get their arms around data. I was just at an exhibition at a small museum on Cape Cod where they had a full room installation, including the floor, where they were looking at the change in the water levels from prehistoric times to current. And you were in this kind of fanciful environment, but it was impactful in terms of thinking about the changes in coastal land and that we are still in that change, that what we think of as Cape Cod today may not be what is Cape Cod tomorrow. So I am seeing it everywhere. I think it's one of the areas where there is possibly some of the biggest stuff happening around the country.
Great. Couple more coming your way. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Many of the examples of art you've shown us symbolize various aspects of civic life together. My question is about beauty. Art that just shows beauty, does that have a significant role to play in civic life? That is an appreciation of beauty for beauty's sake important for a society? Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Jeff, for that question. I really intentionally started with those strong images because I really do want to reinforce that art, the appreciation of beauty for beauty's sake does have a place to play. What gives art and artists their civic role sometimes happens literally in the interpretive. So artists that are looking at environments, whether a landscape or a very abstract view of a world, a place, a theme, a song, an emotion, may come into play in terms of just plain the experience of seeing creative work and what that does for us as an individual. So if we're on the continuum, it is probably in that place of openness, of the ability to see and be affected by things that we view or things that we see or hear. And so I believe very strongly that an appreciation of beauty for beauty's sake is important and important in society. I think we just can't define that as art, or that art is only around the beautiful, because we can see that it is maybe expressing a very, very wide array of views, emotions. Is beauty provocative? Sometimes it is, and sometimes other kinds of work are provocative. So I think it's important in the experience of seeing. Many dialogue specialists use the idea of visual thinking as a way to help viewers interpret work and bring it into their own experience and making connections between the personal and the public. And I think maybe that's the way I'll close in this question, is that the connection between the personal and public is one of the big spaces that the arts really do a lot of their work in terms of a civic role.
Thank you, Barbara. We have another question. The spiral jetty in the Great Salt Lake by Robert Smithson has been able to change the way a lot of people think about and interact with the Great Salt Lake, as you well know. Do you have any thoughts on this piece, or know of any examples of other installations that have made positive impacts on residents' relationships with the land around them?
Definitely so. And so the piece that I showed is actually in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and was inspired by Smithson. And that is very much having that effect of having people both think about the land around them and to utilize that space even more. We have had in Eastern Massachusetts, we have a number of contamination sites. We had an artist who was doing a light exhibit. I'm going to forget his name because I am. Who did a lot of work around light that was reflecting the changes in the environmental landscape as cleanup was happening. And this really brought attention to the community. It was not a negative experience, it was a positive experience, but it was an experience that kept the issue that we have to see this cleanup through, that we are going to keep this cleanup in the public mindset, and in the mindset of the politicians and the policymakers and the funders and the corporations that were responsible, and not let it go away. It definitely had that, but at the same time, it also converted a space. There are a lot of examples of installations in vacant lots that completely change the way a neighborhood is connecting and so on.
Thank you. So here's another one. If you could identify 3 works of art that had the greatest impact on American civic life, what do you think? Which ones would you choose?
I don't know if I can go as big as American civic life, but I'm going to choose, I'm going to mention 3 performing arts pieces for a minute, just to make a point. One is Eve Ensler's The Vagina Monologues. A second is the Laramie Project. And a third is Dead Man Walking. So in the case of Eve Ensler, the Vagina Monologues, once it was performed on Broadway and so on, they created a foundation and they supported the performance of that work by youth, in college settings across the country in different languages, and built education around that work. So the focus on domestic violence, the opportunity for women to come together, I think truly made a huge difference. The Laramie Project took the story of Matthew Shepard. This is the Tectonic Theater Company. That is the most performed play in the United States. People may not know that. And again, after it had a formal run, they did the work to make sure that communities across the country had the capacity to produce the work and to stage the discussions and dialogues that could surround it, to bring those kinds of conversations home. And the last is the Dead Man Walking story, really built on the movie. And then there was an operatic piece that was done in San Francisco. But Tim Robbins, particularly the actor Tim Robbins, who does a lot of work in this space, he also created a new script to talk about the death penalty, aimed particularly at high schools. And so I'm giving you all illustrations of places where the work was excellent work. The work was presented and performed in formal ways, in formal environments, but there was more done with it. And so I think that they are those kinds of pieces. I think otherwise we might be thinking about some public artworks. We might be thinking a lot about the soundtrack of the civil rights movement, and what these things can bring forward. And I think that there's some work being created today that is there. One of the things that's interesting about talking about this today is the whole status of public monument and public art, because we know that communities are reckoning with what has been accepted as the expression of history or great people or heroes, and the whole notion of monumental is being rethought in every community. And so I think it's a great avenue to see the power of creative work, and to also see the ramifications, because as this is an ethics program, there are ethical issues all throughout this work, even when it's done with good intention. So what are we holding up? Whose voices are being held up? Are artists being responsible to the constituents and the audiences with whom they're connecting? These are all important ethical questions that we can ask, and do need to be asked. The idea of being a provocateur, of the arts as provocateur, is a powerful one, and a rightful role for the arts, but it can come with a lot of unexpected or unintended consequence. It could be more divisive than unifying, and that could be good, or that could be not so good. I didn't exactly answer it, but.
No, that's terrific. Speaking of public monuments, could you give our viewers just a little more background on the ethical dimensions of the monuments debates? They've heard headlines, they may have read some articles, but if you can give some context, that would be very helpful.
So in every corner of the United States are often monuments to folks who were considered heroes of a time. And we generally had accepted them. They were there. They were the history of the community as deeply or broadly as the community history was considered. But really, as people have started to question, why do I need to look at a statue of Robert E. Lee if he was the oppressor and not my hero? If I belong in this public space, does he belong in this public space? So that's the essence of the questioning about what our monuments represent, whose history are they telling, and do they deserve to be there, and do they continue to serve in the value of time? So many people in this debate would not simply tear down or take away monuments. They want to use them in some way as education, even if they are removed or repurposed or interpreted, or education is built around them. And for other people, removing them is really the point, and asking the question about who's making the choices about what art is represented in public spaces. How are community voices a part of defining that? And if we're doing it now for ourselves, how valuable or meaningful is that going to be in 3 generations from now? So should public art always be considered forever, or to what degree is it better to have a more temporary or temporal sense of art that is expressing a time or place? That said, we've had a very big explosion in the public art program in the last, I would say, 40 years, 30 years, of abstract work, of work which is meant to mark a place or a space, and much experimentation in work that does in fact reflect more contemporary telling of history, involvement of communities, neighborhoods, and residents. So we have a million great examples of work that really has become a center of contemporary community pride. I'm going to give one small example. In Detroit, Michigan, an African-American artist from a neighborhood who has achieved a good deal of notoriety was asked to create a piece for a very small green circle in the middle of a rotary. And what he created was a pedestal. And the pedestal was a place where the community could come and decide who they would honor annually by adding to the memorial in that space. And I thought that that was just an eloquent recognition of the challenge of putting work that honors into our public spaces.
So in connection to the debates around monuments, and I don't know how much knowledge or context you have, but I'm interested in knowing how well communities have educated the citizenry around the removal of a particular piece. Obviously, we had the removal of the Robert E. Lee monument in Richmond. A lot of people saw that as the culmination, of this effort. I don't know specifically how well that community did in bringing its citizens into dialogue around that, or how much that's an issue.
I'll reference, before I go any further, Matthew Landry, who was the mayor in New Orleans and one of the first people to really speak publicly about the necessity of looking at Confederate monuments more specifically. There's a fabulous piece that he wrote, and his YouTube is out there. So Mitch Landry, the former mayor of New Orleans, I would encourage people to find that. And the answer to your question, Brian, is I think not enough. And the challenge is that debate is so divisive now that communities are finding it, in some cases, more that they believe it's wiser to make a decision, remove the monument, and then keep working. I'm not sure I agree with that, or I agree with that in every case. I think that this work is community to community, because communities are in different places in their dialogue, and how to really create a framework for that decision making, and for considering the options of where else could it be, how would that education happen, what are we going to do with the space that's created? All of those things, I would say not enough, but for people who need change, it's not soon enough. So there's a big challenge in that. I want to mention the Mellon Foundation has invested through something called the Monument Lab that's based in Philadelphia, a great deal of money in thinking about this with communities across the country. And they have a webinar that is scheduled for perhaps tomorrow or next Wednesday. I can't remember, but it might be tomorrow. And I would encourage people to get to the Mellon Foundation website or the Monument Lab website to take a look and to register for that. It's free, and I think it will be extremely good. Paul, who's the director there, is a great thinker, and he's brought a very diverse group of thinkers to the work that they're doing to rethink monuments in this country.
That's terrific. Thank you. This might be a good time to wrap up.
Okay.
Barbara, you've given us so much to think about and ways for us to engage our students. And we hope that more questions arise out of this discussion as your presentation gets disseminated across our campus and in our community. But on behalf of the Center for the Study of Ethics, I want to thank you and wish you all the best in your efforts.
Thank you. It's a fascinating arena of work that brings so many things together, and I'm just going to rush through here and just get to that to close. And am happy to connect with folks. And as I say, you'll find some more links after the presentation when the center posts them. And good luck with your week. It's a great exploration.
Thank you very much. All the best. And to our viewers, we look forward to sessions throughout the week. You can find the complete schedule on the Center for the Study of Ethics webpage where this video is streaming. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Everyone, a great day.